Hello everyone, this is another video for creative writing, and today we're going to talk about, it's got a lot of different names, and I'm going to probably interchange these throughout the whole thing. I'm going to try to call it personal narrative as much as I can. When I was in college, I actually had a class about creative nonfiction, so I might call it that as well. Memoirs are usually more longer pieces, so I probably won't call it that. I'll call it one of these two. But I thought I'd give you all the names here just so you knew kind of what we were doing because I've never taught this before. Um, I we did it in class at UNI, and we kind of did it last semester with someone else's thoughts, but never with our own. And so this is why I've been having you do the journals to try to get your creativity going and then try to get you to remember things and people and places. That way, once you need an idea for this, it might come easier to you. And so today we're going to do a little introduction to the personal narrative, which is what I will be calling it. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is the form and the purpose of the personal narrative, because you're probably wondering, well, why are we writing this? Um, which is right there. The first reason is the act of discovery. And when you're normally writing a paper or an essay, you already have something proven. You're writing to argue something. And the personal narrative is very similar to that, except for you're kind of discovering it as you write, or you're writing this to discover what you're doing. And I know that sounds kind of weird right now, but really you're kind of taking a small idea. Oh, my pen's not going to keep up with me, is it? That's fine. Or a small story, and you're going to tell us the larger idea, the big idea. And I can give you an example of this. So when I was in seventh grade, I had this dream that my dad turned into a water heater. I have no idea. It was the weirdest dream I've ever had, but still, I mean, to this day, it still sticks with me. I can remember it clearly. And so when I was in my creative nonfiction class, I kept asking myself, why did I have this dream? What was the point of it? And so when I wrote about it, I learned some stuff about me and my relationship with my father, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a small idea, this dream that you just have, or an event. I also wrote about, one time my friends and I going to a gas station or a truck stop to get some food. And that idea led to the big idea between, like what friendship was and all that stuff and blah, blah, blah. I still have them somewhere. Maybe I'll bring them in and show you guys. And Doug, I'll fax them to you or something. Do you have fax, Doug? Anyway. So it's a small idea, and through the act of discovery, you kind of get the big idea or the big picture behind it. And I hope that makes sense. And if not, we'll talk about it later on because you'll actually read some personal narratives to get the idea for what you're going to do for your own personal narrative. Okay. The next one is the freedom to write about you. I mean, I hope most of you are familiar with yourself, and but you're gonna be allowed to kind of break a lot of rules that you've been taught, and so you're told. I mean, we're gonna be talking about the truth and how you can bend it and kind of make it, and so that way your story's better, and we'll talk about that later on as well. And so that is this one. It's also a chance to practice your description, which is why we did the imagery assignment, which is why we did the 10-year reunion. The narrative, which is why we did the 10-year reunion, because you're gonna need to use dialogue and stuff like that. Storytelling, you need to know that form, etc., etc. It's also a chance to be critical and creative. And what this means is, I mean, it's not just a boring essay, about something. Maybe you are gonna write about a time where, I don't know, something to do with like maybe some serious topic like abortion or gay rights or something like that. And you could write just a persuasive paper about that. But this gives you the chance to be creative while still proving a point. And that's where the critical part comes in. So it's kind of combining an essay and a short story to kind of create your own it's its own genre because of that. It's a personal narrative, creative nonfiction. Nonfiction, remember, means real, so but it's also creative, and so it's a story about you, and it's a chance for you to use your creativity. And I think I have one more. Hang on a second. There we go. And like I said up here, it's a link to something larger. And so it's also a chance for you to connect to your reader. And I'm hoping that we do something to publish these somewhere online, maybe a blog that other people can see and read. Because that's the whole point of writing, is to write for an audience. And I don't like the whole idea that you're writing just kind of for me. And this is our first real big assignment, and so I want that real audience. And so we'll talk about that later on, about how we're going to publish these online, where we are, and stuff like that. So once again, this last one is kind of what I talked about up here. The big idea is linking to something larger that we all can understand, we all can relate to. Yeah, no one's gonna relate to my dream about, my dad turning into a water heater, but they're going to understand that relationship that, a child has with a parent. They're not going to understand the humor in my personal narrative about going to a truck stop to get food, at 11 o'clock at night. But they are going to understand the big idea behind friendship and what it means to be a friend. And so your little story is going to be a stepping stone to something much bigger that everyone can agree on. And I'm just drawing now. So, all right. Also, I forgot to tell you this. You should probably be taking notes on this because I don't have a document with all these in it. Um, I'm using a program that lets me write. So, yeah, just pause the video right now. Take some notes on this kind of stuff. Small idea, big idea, all this stuff. Critical is like an actual essay. Creative is like a story. So it kind of combines the two. I just drew a face. It looks like combines the two. Okay? And so make sure you're writing this stuff down because you're probably going to need to know it. Because one of the questions deals with, these styles and the styles that are coming up later on in this essay or in this slideshow. So the next thing we're going to talk about is some other things about the form. What do these forms normally take? And once again, these are not for every personal narrative. If you want to bend the rules of what a personal narrative is, you can certainly do that. Um, Not too much to make it a short story, and not too much to make it just a regular essay. So you want to kind of stick with some of the key things, and these are some of the key things. The first one is first person narrative. And if you don't know what first person is, first person uses words like I or me or we. That's first person. Okay? If you're reading a story and it has a first person narrator, they're actually a character in the story. Okay? And we'll compare that to a third person, which would be he, she, they. Um, There's also second person, which is you, but that's not used a whole lot in narratives. That one is mostly used in cookbooks, do-it-yourself books. Sometimes they have those choose-your-own-adventure books that would have you as well. So green is go, first person, red stop. Don't use those, okay? I'll switch off the green down here. All right, the next one is honesty and your ability to kind of stretch the truth because you're going to have dialogue in these. And if you're going to retell a story from, 10 years ago, you don't know exactly what words were said. Now, for this assignment, you are going to have to interview one person to kind of help you out because most of these stories normally have someone else in them, and they can maybe give you some insight on their perspective from it. And so you're not going to get direct quotes. I'm not expecting you to get direct quotes, so don't worry about that. Okay, I'm gonna quotes. There we go. Okay, but you are gonna create dialogue. You're gonna create description to make your story better. Because if you're just gonna have a boring story of I did this, I did this, I did this, I learned this, the end. That's not fun to read for anyone. And so you're gonna kind of stretch the truth to make it more appealing to your audience, which is me, your fellow classmates, and other people who are gonna read these online somehow. Okay, it's open ended, which means this is all about the discovery. Um, if you already know exactly what a certain event meant to you, there's no point in really writing about it because if it's easy for you to figure out, it's probably easy for your audience to figure out, and it's probably honestly it's probably not important. I know that sounds terrible, completely terrible, but it's probably the truth. And so with that, I mean, you don't want to do one of those like looking back, I know kind of things. Doogie Howser, and that's a completely old reference. But at the end of, I mean, Doogie Howser, Sex and the City, Scrubs, they all did this kind of, oh, at the end of the day, I learned blah blah blah. South Park did it too, and it's like we don't necessarily want that or need that because you can have a story you still might not know what the exact answer is to your thesis, quote unquote. Once again, you're going to have an implied thesis. Um, and so there's going to be room for interpretation. I mean, your audience my dream, if I told you guys that dream and what it meant to me or what I thought it meant to me, you guys might say that's completely wrong and what you thought because maybe you have a connection with your own family that I don't. And so it's not going to be cut and dry. It's going to be open ended. It's going to be honest. And it's going to be in first person. Some other things. The subject is often commonplace, meaning yeah, there was probably, not everyone's got like a big event, You could write about the time that you saved two young girls in a fire. However, none of us probably have ever done that. So now you could write about a time that maybe your brother burnt one of your Barbie dolls. Or, something small and minuscule that, might not have a whole lot behind it at the moment. But then once you get to reading it, you're like, oh, I get it. So commonplace, common things. I don't want to read about a big grand thing. I want, some common things and then your interpretation of those common things. Also, it is a narrative. And this means that you are also telling, let me get back to green here, two stories. Because you're going to be in your story, but if you're writing about when you were 5, you're not going to do it from the perspective of you at 5. You're going to do it at the perspective of you right now. And so I mean, and so, I don't know, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And so you're gonna have you're gonna have two characters that are you. You're gonna have the 17 or 18-year-old you, and you're gonna have the 5-year-old you or the 10-year-old you, or maybe the 16-year-old you. Maybe yours was just last year. And so there's two stories. Oh, jeez, two stories going on. Okay, the next one is an argument and a thesis. Now, the thesis. Now, most of you guys know what a thesis statement is. It's the argument for your whole paper when you write papers. You're gonna have one in this as well, but it's not gonna be stated. Um, it's kind of like an Aesop fable. You know how at the end they have like the lesson you learn? It's kind of like that, only that's not going to be in there either. Everything's going to be implied, not stated in it, okay? So we as a reader would come to our own conclusion of what your argument or your thesis statement was. And then your story would be evidence to back that up. And I think you'll understand that a little bit more once we get talking about our the story that you guys are gonna read on your own. All right, and last is memory and observation. So this means a couple different things. One, you're gonna use your own memory because it's an event that happened to you, obviously. And it's gonna be kind of like what you observed. And you can make some of this stuff up to make it more interesting. I've read a lot of different personal narratives where the writer uses really minuscule detail, and it's like there's no way that you remember that. And so you have that freedom to kind of make up descriptions to help move your story along. And although it's a memory about you and it's your story, you still are going to have to interview at least one person for this. And the reason I'm doing that is because one, I want you to learn how to interview people. I think that talking to people, asking questions is a really important thing to know and learn how to do. And also I want you to get maybe another perspective from the story. Maybe there's a quote or details that you don't remember that someone else does that are like, oh, that's really awesome. And you can add it into your story, okay? Just because it's your story doesn't mean that it's got to be completely from your perspective. All right. I think that was it. That's it for this one. So now, what you're gonna do, there is going to be a an assignment now, which will be due on Friday the 28th. So Friday the 28th to 28. Okay. Let's go see what it is. All right. So you're gonna go to the website and go under personal narrative. So I'm on the website. It looks like this. Hopefully, you've been doing these journals, and hopefully, and maybe one of them will actually help trigger a writing assignment for you. Okay, you're going to personal narrative. Don't click on 10-year reunion. Just click on personal narrative, and down here, the video will be right here. So obviously, so down here it says George Orwell, and it's a document, and you're going to open up this document, and so it's going to open up as a Google Doc. I might print off a couple of these for you guys, just having class. Doug, I'm sorry you can't do it. And so this is called A Hanging by George Orwell, and it's not very long. It's 4.5 pages, if that, and it's a personal narrative of something that George Orwell saw. And so you're going to answer these questions, and let me see if I can zoom in on these questions. Maybe not. Yay, technology. All right, so. The first question you're going to answer is what is his argument and evaluation? So, what is kind of his thesis or his implied thesis, or what does he want you to think about? It's pretty easy in this one, I would say. And then, is he convincing? He's kind of telling you not to do something, or not for people to do something, or for people to do something, and then he kind of supports it. And so, is he convincing? Why is he convincing? And then, what reasons or evidence does he provide? Now, this isn't, last year we did debate, so, it's not going to be stats or facts or, expert opinion like that. It's going to be his own personal stuff and emotional stuff to, evoke emotion from you, the reader. Okay? The next one. In what ways is this more effective than a regular old essay on the subject? Why is this better than just writing about it? The subject. I'm not going to tell you what the subject is because that goes up to number one. Sorry. Um, the next one. How would you characterize the tone of the piece? The tone is kind of like it's a lot like the mood. Is it a serious? Is it funny? Is it sad? What kind of tone is set, and how do you know that tone is being used or supposed to be? You know, and so you're gonna find specific examples of words or phrases that create this impression. And these are adjectives. Adjectives, remember, describe a noun. Metaphors, they are, it's kind of symbol. Metaphors, symbols, similes, all those kind of things. How do those kind of set the tone and the mood of this piece? Um, so now you're gonna go back to the features I discussed in the video, which you're listening to right now, and hopefully you've taken notes over them. In what ways does this essay either stick to those features, and in what ways does this personal essay differ? So, he doesn't, Orwell doesn't use all of them, because Orwell is a famous fiction writer, so he has a little leeway, and, he wrote 1984 and stuff like that. Um, Number five, why do you think we're not told of the crime he committed? And that's directly from the text. And then why do they laugh at the end? And what about this event brings both Englishmen and the Indians together? And so those are your 6 questions. Tomorrow I will be out of the building. I'm taking my students to speech. If you have any questions over this, you can either email me. I'll have my phone on me so I can answer emails, or just ask me on Thursday when you'll be working on this in class. Okay? Make sure you get missing assignments in if you have any out, because this is going to take up a lot of our time now. And so you don't want anything kind of looming over you before we start. So, have fun with this. Read a hanging. Remember, it's due on Friday. And have a good rest of your day.